Okay, thanks, Darren. Welcome everybody to this Fresh Burst, 4 critical actions for everyday success. My name's Craig Stevens, part of Fresh Networking and a business performance coach. And despite being a business performance coach and I guess the assumption that I know what I'm doing when it comes to my own life, I'm going to share with you some learnings about what I've been through over the last 18 months and why now I've recognized these 4 critical actions are really important for everyday success. So, brief story. I noticed over the past probably 6 months that I had a particular point in time during the week where I was particularly agitated. My wife and my children noticed it as well. And it was actually a Monday. Monday, habitually, I was like this rope. I was about to snap. And it took me a while to recognize a pattern of behavior, which has led me to identify these 4 critical actions. Initially, the focus and often the talk is that, hey, get some more sleep because sleep's important. And there's no doubt when you look at all the research, sleep has a significant impact on our health and well-being, not just physically in terms of our biological rhythm, but in terms of our brain processes. So how it impacts our memory consolidation, the neural connections that we have created throughout the day. It impacts the way we process information. And also, obviously, a good night's sleep can improve mental health, general well-being, and boost workplace productivity. So, simple solution, get more sleep. Well, I tried that, and there was still something happening on a Monday that was really impacting the way I was performing. And really still feeling like this tension. So I went back to what I knew in terms of the way I approach performance. We inherently are remarkable creatures, but often there's a trade-off. And part of it when it comes to human performance is what I call the performance bind. And it's made up of these 3 critical aspects of being human. Our beliefs and how they influence our day-to-day, our biases, the ways that we make sense of the world and how they can actually sometimes derail our own intent, and our behaviors, what we physically do. The challenge around beliefs is that sometimes we don't know and we're not conscious of our beliefs. Our biases too can be unconscious, and whilst they might simplify the way we work, they sometimes aren't the right approaches or the right habits to apply to new circumstances. And thirdly, our behaviors can sometimes, when we're unconscious, be unaware. We're actually not even aware of the impact we're having on ourselves and those around us. When we are, although, more aware of generally how we perform, 3 things happen. We get increased awareness, acceptance, and accountability. And when I sort of thought about this more, I began to sort of pick apart, why was it on a Monday that I felt I had less awareness, acceptance, and accountability? So the next task was to sort of think, well, how do I work? There's a lot of talk and there's a lot of material available that describes the importance of how we work. And some of us have, particular practices, and typically what we're trying to do is either become more efficient or more effective in the way that we work. And so we might just begin to become, I guess, better note takers or reflect more on the work that we do day to day and the way that we actually, manually do the work. We might actually start to try and organize the way we work visually. And most of us are quite visual in the way that we make sense of the world. So we try to organize the way we work to make it, I guess, give us a sense of more control, especially given that there is always unpredicted work that can come in and railroad what we had planned for the day. We might try and automate stuff and get good at actually organizing task lists by using applications that help us build lists and manage lists. We might look at, full of software applications like Monday to try and project manage the work we do, or even, use something like Pipedrive where we try and actually organize and sequence work as a life cycle. So often when we're struggling with performance, the solution can be suggested to get better at organizing your work. And that was exactly the sequence that I took recently to try and deal with this, I guess, this realization that I wasn't at my best on a Monday. And that wasn't the solution ultimately. What was the solution? What the realization was, is that I wasn't really understanding what I needed to have achieved at the end of the day to feel satisfied. So why was that happening on a Monday? Well, the realization was ultimately that the weekend I was dedicating to my family, which is a good pursuit. But what it meant is that when I came to the Monday, I felt there were aspects of my work that I hadn't satisfied over that weekend because I wasn't working. Now, the solution wasn't to work the weekend as well. That's not a solution. I'll share with you the solution shortly. But more importantly what was I missing over the course of that weekend that made me feel satisfied about work? And this is what I'll share with you now, these 4 critical actions, which I believe, certainly in my case, when I've done at least one of these throughout the day, I will actually naturally get to a better position to have a great night's sleep because I will feel satisfied with my day. Okay, let's look at them in terms of a matrix, a 4-box model. And models are great because they're always right until they're wrong. So just run with it for at least the next 10 minutes and accept that what I'm about to tell you is perfect. All right. So we have ultimately at 2 ends of a continuum, opportunities and challenges. That's really what, in its simplest form, life is about. We can pursue opportunities or we can deal and address challenges. On the other side of the matrix, to simplify this, I look at 2 other elements, tasks and people. So are the activities and the work that you need to do task-oriented or people-oriented? And within this 4-box matrix, I've identified these 4 critical actions that fit within these continuums. Firstly, the first critical action is making decisions. And decisions really about committing. And in particular, decisions about taking opportunities. That I feel, certainly in my life, if I can see that during the day I've made decisions, I've committed to something, that makes me feel a sense of control. And control, to be honest, is important for me. It's important for a lot of people in terms of how it actually aids your sense of well-being when it comes to life in general and work in particular. So making decisions is really important. Secondly, solving problems. And problems are about change. And the challenge of problems is that they might disrupt your status quo and you need to respond to them. I find that if I've at least may not have actually changed and solved the problem in a day, but I've taken a step towards getting closer to a solution, that sets me up for a better night's sleep, feeling more, I guess, at ease with my work and set up for the next day really well. The third one is resolving conflict. And that conflict is more people orientated. Now that could be conflict directly with other people in your life, or it could be internal conflict about how you're feeling about yourself and your maybe your self-worth or your performance. So taking an action each day that actually goes towards resolving or addressing or perhaps even enhancing a relationship, I believe, and certainly in my life again, is important. When I've ticked that off, one action for the day where I've felt like I've either resolved a conflict or I've boosted the strength of a relationship, then that's been a good day. And finally, feedback. And feedback sits in this top right-hand quadrant because it is people-oriented and it is about opportunity, because giving and gaining feedback in the day helps with your understanding about yourself and also your understanding about the world in general. So I find that when I've actually have had an opportunity to give or gain feedback with people throughout the day, that also gives me a sense of accomplishment and achievement. Now, I'm not saying that these are necessarily the same priorities that you have necessarily in your life, but certainly in the work that I've done with clients subsequent to this, when we've got clients actively being conscious of where they could spend time around these 4 tasks in a day, planning for that, and then accomplishing that at the end of the day, that they've got a greater sense of purpose and a greater sense of control and satisfaction with their day. It's interesting, I somewhat tongue-in-cheek in the promotional material for this webinar, put a couple of lines up there. But firstly, if you haven't got time to join this webinar, then you must attend this webinar. And look, there's some truth in that, because what we find is that when we're running out of time, the solution may not be find an app that can help control your time better. It really is about understanding where you're dedicating your effort. And typically time is consumed when we have problems or conflict going on. It's around those challenges. Time gets eaten up with perhaps unnecessary tasks or tasks that could be avoided. So when you are actually focused on just solving one problem that day, how big or small, it's not so much the size, it's the actual action of doing it, of facing into it. And the same with resolving a conflict, whether it's just how you're feeling and trying to turn around negative emotion to something positive, or whether it's actually about the relationship with someone. When you spend time on these, somewhat not so ironically, but significantly, you can actually begin to save time in the future, because these problems and the conflict resolution, they're often also associated with procrastination as well. So whenever you're not, you haven't got time, the question is, well, how are you planning for that? But spend some time on a problem or conflict and see how that changes how you're feeling about the time that you have, and the opportunity it creates in actually gaining more time into the future. Secondly, I said that if you can't decide whether to register for this webinar or not, this session is for you, because it emphasizes the importance of decisions. And I believe too that often when we look at how we organize our tasks, we don't actually think about the tasks in terms of decisions, problems, conflict, and feedback. And I will recommend that shortly. But certainly, if you're umming and ahhing, or you can't be decisive about a decision, and it's going on and on and on, that's not healthy. So I believe that when you're actively making decisions, and you can see the benefit and the impact of those decisions, that actually is a more productive way of getting through the day. So I always make a note of what decisions I made at the end of the day, and again, it gives me a sense of accomplishment and control. And I also said that if your business is running smoothly, you can't afford not to be there. So again, the point here is that when things are going well, we can sometimes become complacent about our circumstances and our context. So continually getting feedback is a great way to understand exactly, well, what's going well for me right now? Why is that going well for me? But what potentially could change? What's going on that perhaps I need to be aware of going forward? So feedback is a great mechanism to have. And I'm always seeking to get a piece of feedback in particular at the end of the day that gives me a thought as to perhaps what I need to focus on, or what I could improve going forward as well. So these are the 4 critical actions. And in the download that I've just put up in the chat box, it is very simple as doing this. Download this template, a 1-pager, and the best approach is to actually plan out what decision will I make today? What decision do I need to actually resolve today? What problems do I need to face into, and how could I actually get a step closer to dealing with that problem? If I have any conflict with a person or myself, what step could I take to actually resolve that, or at least, again, progress towards some sort of resolution? And in terms of feedback, what could I get feedback about today? Often what we do when we plan out our day, we just plan out tasks that we have to do, but we don't necessarily assess the importance and the purpose of those tasks. Sure, they might be relevant to the work we're doing, but make sure that amongst those tasks you're planning out, you actually have one task that is going to lead to a decision, a problem being solved, a conflict being resolved, and feedback being obtained, and test it and see. And you might come back to me and say, hey, Craig, there's actually another 2 critical actions that I find that are more important for me to feel satisfied at the end of the day. And I focus on the day because, again, getting back to sleep is the time where we should be ultimately rejuvenating ourselves for the next day. So I believe a daily focus on this is healthy, because it's going to lead, again, in my experience, to a more effective and productive sleep that I'm rejuvenated for the next day. As for the Monday, again, my solution couldn't be that I would simply just work the whole weekend and make decisions, solve problems, resolve conflict, and give and gain feedback over the weekend as well. What I learned from that is that I needed to make sure that I planned out the Monday morning, that first hour, to make sure that I did each of these 4 things within the first hour. And that got me back on track. And that then ensured that I wasn't waiting until, maybe 4 o'clock in the afternoon when I typically get around to do this, that I was then out of my funk, as Christelle, my wife, would describe it. So look, that's for me, they're the 4 critical actions for everyday success. Have a play with it, test it out, and ultimately, move from this, in my case, this sense of tension around my sense of accomplishment, to one where I was actually more present. And I found that when I am addressing these 4 things, and again, it's not changing the world, it's just 4 actions around these 4 key areas that I found that was enabling me to be more present and more effective when I was amongst people and focusing on my work. That's it. Any questions at all?